What's a movie with a great premise, but a terrible execution? Jumper. I still actually enjoy the movie a lot, because the premise is so cool, and it has its moments, but it could been better for sure. Once a quarter I text the same friend, dang, I wish they made a Jumper sequel. It was one of those movies made at the time when everyone was so desperate for a franchise that could appeal to teens and adults, that the first movie focused so hard on being the first in a trilogy that it forgot to be fun. The plans for the trilogy sounded awesome. I'm Number 4 did the same thing. Push was an example and failure in this era also. I will forever stay mad about how badly Eragon turned out. Heh. The man himself loved books BTW. In Time with Justin Timberlake. Everyone ages normally until 25 and after that you have a number ticking away on your forearm. You can earn more time, but whenever it runs out you die on the spot. The rich are basically immortal, and the poor, that are paycheck to paycheck, are one wrong move away from death. Cool idea for a commentary on inequality, but not well executed. Yep, great example. I didn't think it was terrible, but done right it could have been incredible. I remember being amazed the first time I watched it and thought, wow, how crazy would that if that was real life. So I tried to rewatch it again, and you start to notice how certain things in the movie are forced. Lots of plot holes. But still, I think it's a good movie. Not great, but a good watch if you have never seen it. Mortal Engines. The steampunk-esque engineering aspect was so cool, but it ended up being about some sappy romance between teens. A letdown. The visuals were kick-ass though. That's disappointing. I've seen a trailer, and it looked freaking awesome, based on the steampunk moving cities. To be fair, the movie does look awesome when you watch it. If all you want to see is a movie with really cool looking giant moving steampunk cities, then you'll get a movie with really cool looking giant moving steampunk cities. As long as that's all you're looking for, you can enjoy the movie. I saw the movie based on the visuals in the trailer, and the visuals in the movie itself didn't disappoint. They were great. Just don't expect anything out of the writing or story. The Dark Tower. Source material, Stephen King book series, is amazing. Movie is crap. I wanted to like this movie so much. I love Idris Elba as an actor, and had no problems with his casting as Roland. His dynamic with Jake is one of my favorite aspects of the first book. There's a line really early in the movie where Jake says something like, "You're a gunslinger," and Roland says, "There are no more gunslingers," and I just turned the movie off. I understood that this was another reiteration, but I could not conceive of a version of Roland Deschain who forgets the face of his father and denies that fact that, as long as he is alive, he is a gunslinger and has a duty to fulfill, and he carries all the names of those he lost on the journey, so the gunslingers are alive as long as he is alive. I get it was a throwaway line, but it just sat wrong with me. I agree. They could not have had a better cast, but the plot was atrocious. However, when I read the books, after seeing the movie, it was a delight to picture Idris as the gunslinger and Matthew McWhirter as the other dude. I haven't made it all the way through book 5 yet, it's a bit slow. The Percy Jackson and Artemis Fowl movies. They are two of my favorite book series, but they combined too much stuff from the books and changed more of it to the point where it feels like a different series. Edit. I haven't seen them in a while, but yes, Eragon and Avatar: The Last Airbender, the live action one, to be clear, were terrible as well. They keep trying to recapture the success of the Harry Potter franchise with other book series with half the effort put in. Yeah. They're trying it again with Percy Jackson, and this time Rick Riordan is going to be involved with the production. Hancock. It's half of a great movie with a different terrible movie for the second half. Superhero is alcoholic and misanthropic, but tries to help anyway, causes collateral damage when he stops crime. People hate him for it. One day, he saves a struggling PR expert's life from an asshole who hates the PR guy, who promises to pay him back by improving his image. New suit and everything, but he has to go to prison. He refuses, but eventually relents, goes to prison, flies out to collect a basketball that bounced out, flies back in to finish his sentence. After a while, crime rates go back up. Superhero goes to save the day, but the asshole from before has now plotted to frame the PR guy and the hero, but the hero stops crimes, stops him, and stops his reputation being destroyed from being framed, and is welcomed by the community as a hero. PZ. You don't have to be Vince Gilligan to realize sticking a sudden twist with an immortal being's cuck angle would make things much worse. That's the thing, the first half is an amazing man vs self kind of story, with a side of man vs society, though that largely comes out of his own mistakes. The second half tries to move into a man vs man superhero story, and it blows. I'd rather have had more time with him exploring how to reintegrate into society. He started a journey, it doesn't mean he finished it. Hell, him having to testify against the people he put away would have been a great scene, as he tries to control himself in a courtroom while they try to bait him. Downsizing. A movie with people being shrunk down to 5 inches, so obviously it's about a boring romance and global warming. I think of it as a movie that thought it was too good for its own premise. That movie had an identity complex, it didn't know what it wanted to be. It sucked. Felt like at least 3 movies randomly stitched together. Almost enjoyed the lack of a formulaic plot, since I've gotten so damn sick of the standard Hollywood plot structure, but there just wasn't any structure to the story at all. Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. Like you're telling me that with all of the source material that inspired tons of well-known sci-fi franchises today, and a $177 million budget, they FK'd it up with miscasting the leads and an unfocused plot. I'm also a huge fan of the Valerian and Laureline comics, so it bummed me out how they fumbled the one chance at a live action film. Can we cast 2 actors that have no chemistry whatsoever, and on top of that they also look like brother and sister? No chemistry, look like brother and sister, and look far too young for the offices they supposedly hold. Like I'm supposed to believe the 17-year-old looking kid is what was he, a major? That's a job you don't typically get until you're north of 30, typically, if not a few years after that. I watched this documentary about Frozen 2 and its production, and how they basically needed to redo the entire movie in 3 months, because the kids didn't like it. So it went from this super thought out storyline to a bit of a mishmash of unsatisfying plot lines. I always wonder what we could have had instead. So yay, Frozen 2. Damn, that's disappointing. I just watched it recently and felt like it could have been so much stronger if it picked a couple themes and ran with them instead of half checking a box with every character. My immediate and lasting impression of that movie is that somewhere there's an excellent book it is based upon that I just haven't read. It felt like an adaptation of something that doesn't exist, as if the key moments and plot threads of the novel are just being referenced in the movie and thus lost their impact. Water having memory, an old war, a trapped civilization, the history of Arendelle, the mysteries and depths of Elsa's powers, the elemental spirits. There's so much crying out for exposition that we never get, and that the movie just expects you to know somehow. It's how I'd imagine the later Harry Potter movies would feel like to someone who hasn't read the books. It's maddening. Frozen 2 was still fun, but goddammit, even talking about it reminded me how much I want the 600-page source novel that does not exist instead. Gods of Egypt. That movie is criminally bad yet had all the potential in the world to be a massive hit and cement itself as one of the best movies based on ancient mythology. OMG, this movie was horrifically bad. I remember that it came out around the time when all the Greek mythology movies were super popular. Clash of the Titans, War of the Titans, Hercules etc. There were like 3 Hercules movies in a span of a couple years. The third one, the one with The Rock, takes a potshot at how bad the other 2 were. It was mediocre but watchable. World War Z. I didn't hate the movie, but the book was so much better. I could see this as a Band of Brothers type miniseries. They bought the name, not the book. I'm pretty sure the studio already had the script lying around, and they just weren't sure how to sell it, so they bought the rights to WWZ and just slapped the name on. The Robin Hood movie with Russell Crowe. It was written to be told from the Sheriff of Nottingham's viewpoint and the villain was right style. Then the studio chickened out and made another vanilla Robin Hood movie. I like it wasn't so much the villain is right as the Sheriff of Nottingham trying to catch a serial killer and Robin Hood being a minor side character. That sounds dope. The Purge. What a freaking brilliant concept. They could've done so many different things with it, but they chose a goddamn house invasion storyline. One of the biggest disappointments in cinema for me. I want to see a courtroom drama about a guy who filed his taxes on purge night and claimed enough funny deductions to make himself a millionaire. Now you're talking dirty to me. I'm a tax accountant. Dark Phoenix. We've run out of mutant enemies, let's do aliens. Simon Kinberg fricks up Dark Phoenix storyline in 2006. I've learned from my mistakes. Simon Kinberg fricks up Dark Phoenix storyline in 2019. The fact that they brought him back to do it again tells me that the execs intended for this movie to be terrible. The movie Avatar: The Last Airbender. I don't believe there's a movie in existence with such a poor execution. It's almost hard to believe how bad that film was. There is no movie in basing SE. Daybreakers was a pretty cool look at a vampire society, but the second half about the cure was so dumb. The scene where they were getting cured en masse was such a cool scene, or at least the filming was neat. Both cure scenes actually. I really like the car. Green Lantern. They had the source material, and it was a disaster, just bad with the CGI and the plot. Oof. Green Lantern has a whole franchise of content in the Sinestro Corp War. They are sitting on a damn gold mine of imaginative characters, action spectacle and just enough edge to set itself apart. But the movie they already did was so damn terrible we'll never get it. Apparently the actual script they wanted to shoot with got completely butchered by the suits. Jeff Johns had helped write it and it would have been a very different movie. Hell, even going back to Earth was a mandated change from the execs because they didn't think people would care about space. Kilowog, Tomari, Hal and Sinestro were all supposed to disobey the Guardians and go fight Parallax together, not in Earth, who was a late movie reveal, and a myriad other changes. Martin Campbell refuses to talk about the movie for a reason. Jupiter Ascending. Find out you own a planet. Definitely go back to cleaning toilets. And no less with your mathematician professor mother who apparently never found a university in need of Russian adjuncts. Yeah, okay. Christ, the plot phoned it in, yet all anyone complains about is the rollerblading in the sky. Ha. Honestly, the only thing I remember from that movie is the line "I love dogs." I remember dying laughing in the theater at that one. Man of the Year. A comedian launches a third-party bid for the presidency and wins. Despite a solid performance from Robin Williams, a thoroughly forgettable movie with a lame script. Cold had a lot of heart and a lot of laughs. And the worst presentation I've ever seen of software development. No company has ever tried to destroy an employee for putting in extra time to check bugs. That could be internationally embarrassing, especially when the person is working within the system. You realize it wasn't a bug, right? It was a deliberately inserted piece of code to rig the election. Carefully designed to not show up in testing. They had to destroy her, not because of extra testing, but to tarnish her reputation, so people would dismiss her when she said the election was rigged. Percy Jackson. They literally had all the great source material in their hands and threw it all aside to make their own dumb movie with just the same character names. Essentially they just stole the brand recognition of the book series and besmirched it. R.I.P.D. with Ryan Reynolds and Jeff Bridges. You mean discount Men in Black when you order the Men in Black on Wish? Seventh Son. It's based on the Last Apprentice book series by Joseph Delaney, which are fantastic books. The movie on the other hand is terrible and was a big flop. Whoever thought to have Jeff Bridges do that accent was an idiot. I went and read a little about this and was shocked that it has such similar ties to the Dark is Rising sequence, which was a staple of my childhood, but they are based in the same mythology, so I suppose I should be less surprised than I was. I have no idea if the writing is similar and whether you would enjoy it, but the Dark is Rising series is fantastic and well worth a read, and ironically also had a lackluster film that should have been great. The Happening. The movie gets gradually worse every time anyone opens their mouth. I always thought the idea was cool and really scary. Try watching it as a satirical comedy instead of a serious work. This works for all MNS's work from Signs onward. Passengers. Should have been told from the girls' POV. 100% would have been better as a horror movie instead of romance. Yep. She finds a hidden freezer and discovers she wasn't his first choice, or second, or third, essentially Bluebeard in space. Not a movie, but anime nerds will likely agree. Sword Art Online. Wow, what a great premise. People trapped in a virtual video game, and if you die in the game, you die in real life. Players can kill each other. Accidents can happen. Sacrifices and betrayals can happen. This gives everything a very dark overtone. You have the chance for friendships, rivalries, all sorts of opportunities to play off of real human emotions in a fantastical world. The video game also has 100 bosses to beat, with each floor in between being unique, so boom, you have multiple seasons if you want it. But nope, you get what's probably the most hilarious example of horny teenager insert I've ever seen. Its premise was enough to kickstart the isekai boom, but it also established the boringly overpowered protagonist who also has a harem, for some reason, trope common in those series. I think what makes the boringly overpowered trope is even worse, especially in SAO, is how obvious Kirito is a void that allows the teenage boy reader to insert himself into the story. Constantly underestimated due to how scrawny he looks, but then he surprises everyone. So much so that every girl around him swoons, even his sister. Yikes. The Assassin's Creed movie. All they had to do was recreate the Ezio storyline and would have had a chance at actually being good. How do you mess it up so badly? Ezio's storyline was made for the big screen. Spend the first 10 minutes getting us attached to his fiancée and his family, especially his brother. His dad is around long enough to tell Ezio about his birthright as an assassin, then gets killed with the brother. Ezio assassinates the executioner, messily, and then is found by an assassin master who trains him for years. He dedicates his life to revenge for his parents and furthering the assassins, abandoning his old life and his fiancée. Years later, he finds out she's getting married and comes to her and tells her he wishes things could have been different. The climax is him carrying out the assassination of the Borgias, finding out that he's being guided by a Sifi power from the start, and leave the door open for a sequel. Yesterday, a man wakes up in a world where the Beatles never existed. Amazing premise, awful ending. They did not know how to land that plane well. Scrolled way too far to see this. It could have been really fun to see the movie that the trailer made it out to be. Instead we got a run-of-the-mill romantic comedy shoved in there. It was predictable. The conversation with John Lennon was a nice touch. In time. I love the concept and the world, but unfortunately it's just a movie where pretty people run around for an hour and a half. Total waste. That's insane. As soon as I saw the title of the post in time popped into my head. I had not thought about that movie in years. A Wrinkle in Time was one of my favorite books as a child. Disney's version was so bad I had to turn it off after 5 minutes. I've willingly sat through a lot of bad movies in my day, but it was so cringy I just couldn't do it. A reviewer I saw on the internet loved it because it was like a self-help book in movie form. And that's exactly why I hated the movie. It was so on the nose and syrupy. You're special because you are. You don't have to do or say anything special. You're just special. Look, this kid is special because he draws on paper at school. That's not a normal kid thing, right? I didn't want opera telling me to love myself. I didn't want to watch a kid try to balance on one foot for half an hour as some dragged out allegory for balancing yourself. I wanted a fantastical world's wide allegory for good and evil and how logic is important, but love wins all. I wanted Meg shouting at her father and stubbornly staying behind. I wanted Charles Wallace to actually be silent. I wanted the witches to actually be quirky and odd. I wanted the creepy pulsing brain rhythm torturing the boy with the ball. And instead we got a movie version of a self-help book. Eragon and Percy Jackson. The movies could have been so much better to follow the amazing books. Oh, and Golden Compass. I actually kinda like the Golden Compass, but mostly just because the polar bear fight is about the coolest freaking thing I've ever seen. Lol. I never read the books either though, so I don't know how much any kind of disappointment in that regard plays into audience opinion. Not a movie, Man in the High Castle. Like seriously, a WW2 Axis victory is such a good topic to make a show about. They somehow managed to make this boring and they also managed to ruin it somehow. Also the way they designed the world made no sense at all. Exactly. When you have such a good scenario like an Axis victory, you should explore the world more, and the world and show made no sense. The Passion of the Christ really dragged out the execution. Passengers with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence. I think someone mentioned it would be a much better experience if they showed it out of order. Kinda like Memento. More than one take I've heard is that instead of it being a romance, play it as a horror movie. It already has the makings of one until all the cutesy stuff starts happening that's supposed to be seen as sweet. All you need to do is change the tone. Have Lawrence's character be mortified, horrified, and lean the climax in a more tense, thriller-filled direction. Hell, maybe even after killing off Pratt's character in this theoretical version, have Lawrence's character start to go through the same madness that Pratt's did, and have the movie end on her looking over a capsule of another crewmate. Instead, we just have this tone-deaf mess of a movie that ignores the implications of its premise, and I find that deeply saddening. The Chronicles of Narnia Prince Caspian, as well as Voyage of the Dawn Treader. The books the films were based off of were fantastic fantasy stories. Brilliant and exciting and great for all ages. But Caspian and Dawn Treader was a perfect example of not sticking to the original material. They were poorly written and relapsed the character development so many times. The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe was the exact opposite. It stuck to the book, stayed true to the characters, and put heart and soul into the production. It was a shame to see the Narnia story ripped apart just to have two bad movies. Let's be frank here. The source material of those two books makes it hard. Prince Caspian is told in a series of flashbacks, and it's very political. The premise is much like Hamlet, only the prince escapes the machinations of the court and can act completely outside them. Then he joins up with the talking animals of Narnia and calls in the fabled kings and queens of Narnia from the past, which because of Lewis timescaling hijinks, are only a year following the events of LLW. And since it's told in the framing story of the Pevenses entering the world and getting caught up, you'd wind up having a lot of exposition dialogue that doesn't move things forward. So you have to restructure the whole movie, and that means that Caspian's story has to carry more weight. And since it's for children, without the in-story narrator explaining the politics along the way, you have to show it in a way they'll understand, which means more original story to explain it. Don't ask me how they managed to actually screw up the parts of the story that came from the book. The whole final clash between the Narnians and the Telmarines was just poorly explained in the movie. As for Dawn Treader, it was mostly a series of vignettes in book form, like bedtime stories on a single theme. The Search for Lost Lords was just one of those, but the movie used that to tie them all together and it simply wasn't strong enough. Honestly, DT had far more potential if they had found a more original story to tie things together, and I honestly love the visuals a lot more than I did in PC. Sigh. What could have been? Lucy. Pitch meeting guy. Alright, so this movie is basically limitless, but instead of making a little bit of sense, it's gonna make anti-sense. Movie exec guy. I don't know, man. People are starting to expect science-y movies to have some basis in reality. Pitch meeting guy. Did I mention it's gonna star Scarlett Johansson? Movie exec guy. Wow 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 wow. Haha, this is spot on. A movie ending has never mad me off so much. Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. The continual sexual harassment was very hot. Maybe it's considered cute in France. I think they were probably going for a classic James Bond flirty thing, which often overstepped anyway, but also some of it was likely lost in translation. The Island. Lots of ethical questions about cloning and the human life, but it was directed by Michael Bay. Personally, I thought it was pretty good. There's some things that irk me about it, but overall pretty decent emo. Suicide Squad. First one. I will forever think a good Suicide Squad move would be the government having them steal something from Wayne Manor because they suspect Bruce Wayne is Batman. A heist movie where Batman is the antagonist would be amazing. Since I had the idea, I thought I should write it, but I haven't yet. That would be cool. Said a million times, but the first Suicide Squad movie's one saving grace was Margot Robbie. Wonder Woman 1984. I would argue that the premise was garbage to begin with. Why go back to 1984? Why bring back Chris Pine? And why waste a Linda Carter cameo in such a stupid way? More importantly, if you were gonna bring back Chris Pine and bring his character back from the dead, why not just have him be in his own damn body? You've already brought his soul back to life. So the constraints of magic don't let you use his actual body? If only there was some way around that, like magic? Too bad the rules were obviously strict and couldn't be altered anyway.